Welcome to the CultureLab. I'm your host, Bajer. This podcast helps you turn your company culture into rocket fuel for meaningful growth. It gives you the tools and inspiration to make work synonymous with fun, meaning, and belonging. This is where we explore how to cultivate remarkable cultures that scale and evolve as our businesses grow and the world keeps on changing.
Every time somebody tells me, I love your idea, I ask an investment on that idea. I ask money, people, some form of commitment so that essentially this person either is really involved and now we're going to drive it together, but the most of the time, this is forcing people to tell me the truth. The most of the time, they will tell you, well, I love it, but now I have other priorities, but we can work on this next or next year, next month. And so that's great because in this phase of hidden rejection, you need to find who is the people with you and you need to find mostly who are not, those people. And when somebody tells you, well, I'm not ready now, that's great because you unlock the opportunity to ask questions. Why? Why is not the right moment? And maybe you can answer questions that they had that were not asking you. So this is very important because by answering those questions, by engaging in dialogue, you may eventually transform some of these people in a supporter of your project.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 126 of the CultureLab podcast. This episode is brought to you by CultureBrain, a one-of-a-kind accelerator program where culture leaders get hands-on support and guidance on how to reach their goals faster, especially now in this brave new world of remote and hybrid work. CultureBrain connects you with outstanding peers on the same journey, but also with world-class experts, including people you know from the show. And they all help you identify and implement new, better ways of creating a culture where people do their best work. Check it out at tinyurl.com/culturebrain. And no need to write it down. There's a link in the show notes. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt that Sunday dread before work? If yes, you're not alone. I've talked to thousands from Silent Gen to Gen Z, and one thing shines through. We often dread Mondays because we miss having fun at work. And I'm not talking ping pong or pizza parties. I mean the joy that comes from work itself. Now, this sort of fun individually, it happens when we are in our groove, when we can do deep work without distractions, and when we are getting better as we go. Actually, there is a recent study that was published in Harvard Business Review, and it found that our best days at work are often the ones when we feel a sense of progress towards our goals. And this progress doesn't have to be about giant leaps or major milestones. It can be about the small victories. So that was on an individual level. On a team level, the sense of fun that I'm talking about is about jamming together, about real collaboration and creation that sometimes leads to innovation. And at the company level, it's all about creating that playful, light atmosphere that helps people de-stress and as a consequence, fuels creative problem solving. So this November, on the show, but also in the CultureBrain community, we are diving into deep fun at work. And my first guest is Mauro Porcini. Mauro is PepsiCo's first ever Chief Design Officer. His job is all about infusing design thinking into PepsiCo's culture, and he's been leading a new approach to innovation by design that impacts the company's product platforms and brands, which include Pepsi, Lay's, Mountain Dew, Gatorade, SodaStream, Doritos, Bubbly, Aquafina, Cheetos, Quaker, 7-Up, and many, many more. Mauro's philosophy and work are surprisingly close to my research on the 3 pillars of thriving cultures, including fun. So, with no further ado, here is my guest, Mauro Porcini.
Hi, my name is Mauro Porcini, and I am the Chief Design Officer of PepsiCo. And it's really a pleasure to be here today.
It's wonderful to have you with us, Mauro. Welcome to the Culture Lab. I'm so excited about this conversation. I've been following you on various social media for a while and admiring your work from afar. And today, I really want to pick your brain about how to cultivate a culture where people can innovate. But before we go there, there's one question that I ask all of our guests. And this question is about the early cultural influences that shaped you as a person. I know you grew up in Italy, and coincidentally, I spent 10 years in Milan as well myself. My Italian is pretty bad, so we're definitely not doing the interview in Italian. But I'm quite familiar, I think, with the neighborhood where you grew up. However, I don't know much about how you grew up and what impact it had on who you are today. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, first of all, I love that you asked this question to your guest because it's something that spontaneously, in any case, I always love to talk about. I don't know exactly why. I guess it's because a few years ago I went to a major crisis in my life. I did a little bit of therapy and I realized really, really the importance of what happened back then when I was a child. And also because in that crisis, that childhood, together with the people of my childhood, so my family, have been really the safe anchor that really helped me going through the troubled waters of that storm in my life. What happened when I was a child? Well, I had two parents that have been a great inspiration for me. Really, I always talk about them. They told me three things that really changed my life or shaped my life. The first one was this love for culture, love for knowledge. They were literally all the time celebrating people, the new things, that had that kind of knowledge. One of their dreams for me, there are two dreams for me. One of the two was for me to become a professor in university because it was a profession where you will spend all your life deep diving on a specific topic and become mastering really the knowledge and eventually advancing theories in the field. So for them was wow. And I remember when we were watching TV, their celebrities were people that had that kind of culture, people also that were really able to storytell what they knew. They were very eloquent. My mom was very shy. She had a great culture. She would read all the time, write all the time, but she was very shy. So she was also celebrating the ability of transferring that culture and telling stories around this eloquence in front of people. My father was an artist, and I'll tell you in a bit about him. But both of them, with their passions, they've been really very important for me in the development of my personality and my journey. The second value that we're always talking about was the idea of being a good person. Today in English, I say the value of kindness. Uh, for them, that translated in being good Catholic people, Christians. That was their religion. But I realized over the years that what they were talking about totally transcend any kind of faith or religion. It was literally about being a decent human being, being kind to others, caring about others. And again, they were talking about this, but mostly they were behaving in that way. And it was just so normal. I thought that every family, every community, everybody would behave in that way. I realized later on that was not really the case. So those two values were very important. And in the opposite side, they would never talk about fame or wealth or networking to reach the fame or the wealth. Actually, when I started to earn a little bit of money in my first job many years ago, I remember my mom, I was earning more than the average. So I was lucky to find a job, in a family that was very humble. We didn't have a lot of money. My parents, to buy an ice cream for me, they wouldn't buy the ice cream for themselves. They had to check, how to arrive to the end of the month. So that's where I'm coming from. We grew up in the house projects, the four of us sleeping in one bedroom. So just to give you the idea. So I started to earn a little bit of money. And I remember my mom concerned, afraid that I could lose my way, that I could eventually win money, I could lose my way. So this is the culture I came from. Culture and really investing in it, being kind. And then there was another dimension that is being really important. As I said earlier, my mom loved writing, but she didn't go to college because her family didn't have the money to send her to college. She started to work in the world of finance, with a normal position in the Ministry of Finance in Italy, but she hated it. And she loved philosophy, literature, writing. So when she was 38, she decided to leave her job and follow what she loved. There were two things. One is writing and all of this, but for herself, not as a job. And the other one was the official reason to be closer to her children. Now, again, major sacrifice for my family. They didn't have a lot of money. Just my father was working. My father was an architect, but not a successful architect. So he was a teacher in high school, teaching technical drawings and trying to do some architecture project here and there. And so, again, the first example of my mom giving up her job and doing what she loved. And since then, she was 38 when she retired. And until now, she's in her late 70s. Every day of her life, she's been writing, writing, writing. My father, as I said, was an architect and a teacher in high school of technical drawing, but he was an artist inside. He studied art in high school, then he did architecture in college, but he's been painting all his life. I remember myself, as a child with him painting together, doing drawings together. And still today, he paints every day. Every day he keeps painting. Over the years, they published 9 books. Now they're up to 9 online,
Amazing.
self-publishing, with the thoughts of and the prayers and the poems of my mom and the drawings and paintings of my father in the books. And they do it for them. They always say, we don't do it to sell it. I mean, you can go online and find them and buy them, but it's not about selling them. It's about them and the people that care. So their family, their few friends. And so, why I'm telling this story? Because I had in front of me an example of the power of passion, of the power of doing what you love. And this is phenomenal. By the way, I've been lucky then in my life to find that kind of passion, that kind of love in my formal job. What I do at PepsiCo is what my mom was doing writing, what my father was doing painting is my job. So I'm really, really lucky. It didn't come by coincidence because I decided to study what I love and then go after what I love. And when they were briefing me in doing things that I didn't love, well, maybe I did them to survive, to keep the job, but I always push what I thought it was the right thing to do, not just for me, for the team, for the company, and that's what I love, to create valuable things for people in the world. But in their case, if the job doesn't give you that opportunity, try everything you can to transform that job in that opportunity. But sometimes it's not possible for many, many obvious reasons. For life is like this. Well, you can find your passion, your love also outside of that. And at the end of the day, that passion, the love is really what, together with your relation with others, is really what gives meaning to your life and what gives you what we call happiness, that self-realization that is so important to go on.
Absolutely. And you've mentioned it wasn't by coincidence. And I think nothing comes by coincidence. I've done now more than 150 of these interviews with world-class experts, people who have really accomplished incredible things, and their backgrounds are really diverse. But there's one thing that they all have in common, which is there were seeds of who they have eventually become in their childhood. And this is one of the reasons why I love asking this question, because you can really trace back the journey of someone to these early values that were conveyed by parents or grandparents or the environment in which you grew up. And having heard your story, it makes total sense to me why you ended up doing what you're doing. And Mauro, I want to ask you a personal question because you've mentioned something that triggered my curiosity. But if it's something that you don't want to discuss on the show, it's totally okay. You've mentioned that you went through a major crisis and that you did therapy and stuff like that. Is there something that you want to talk about? And the reason why I ask about this is that I personally believe that leaders being vulnerable and talking about their challenges do a lot of good, because it's almost like giving a permission slip to everyone else to say, hey, you know what? It's okay. not to be okay for a while, and you'll figure it out. So I'll just extend this invitation to you if you want to talk about this, and in the extent that you want to talk about this or not.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. Every leader around the world, every person should really showcase her full, his full personality. There are things that you keep private, but in general, it's okay to show both, when things go well and when things don't. And so I've been sharing this story in the past as well. It was the year 2015. I was married and my marriage didn't go well. And we ended up breaking up. And it's been a very difficult moment in my life for a variety of different reasons, but all connected to the breakup. I think one of the things were happening back then in my mind is that for the first time in my life, I lost control. Uh, I I was always in control in a way or the other. I invested in what I love at work, and things went well. Socially, things were going well, and even I'm very optimistic, so I always look at the glass half full. So even when you be like, well, but not that well, in reality, I always saw that progress. For the first time in my life, I couldn't see the glass half full. It was just bad. It was a disaster, and I entered in a loop where I lost control. Literally lost control of my mind. I started to feel what I realized later on was depression. Something that I thought it could never happen to me, never, because I'm super positive. I didn't understand people with depression. I knew there was, a major problem, but I always thought in a very superficial way that in a way or the other you can control it with your mind. It's different than to have a cancer or to have a flu, and instead it's not. It's exactly the same thing. It's something you don't control. By the way, it's also very physical. What happened to me probably was really, hormones and things changing, inside my body to drive something like this because it was extreme. And so, very difficult moment. There is a story that I always tell that is work related that was very important for me. I was in the worst moment of the crisis, and coincidentally, we are in the middle of strategic planning for the company. Strategic planning means that we present the strategic plans for the next 5 years in a week time to the CEO, all of the executives, all the different functions. So back then, here we are in front of the CEO that we had at the time in Dranui, and from 7 a.m. in the morning until 6 p.m. in the evening, we are presenting for a week. The first day, Monday morning, we go, and there was this U table with Indra at the center and all the executives around the table in 2 rows. I was not presenting that day. I was in the second row in an area where for Indra to see me was not easy. And at the first break, she comes to me and she tells me, "What's going on?" I'm like, "No, nothing, Indra, nothing, nothing." She's like, "Something is going on." She sees that I'm uncomfortable to answer and she tells me, "Okay, come with me." She brings me to her office and then she's like, "Okay, tell me what's going on. There is something going on." And she was right. But I was uncomfortable telling the CEO, I was suffering for love.
Yeah.
And then at that point she understood I was really uncomfortable and she told me, look at me like if I was your mother, like if I am your sister, your friend. Don't look at me as a CEO. Tell me what's going on. And I burst in tears, telling her, look, it's so unprofessional. And I told her everything. And she was phenomenal. And she told me, just take time off, take a few weeks off, just go, disappear, and find yourself back. And they told her, no, I need to come to the office because I can't stay by myself. It was one of those moments you don't want to stay by yourself. You need to. But then you go to the office and you're totally not working. But I needed to be around people. And so, long story short, after the day, she's been checking on me, every other day, texting me, calling me, and making sure that I will feel good. But I knew also that I had the support of my CEO. I was there. I didn't feel, unsafe. I didn't feel that I could lose my job. I knew there was a human being there supporting me. And it was her, but then also, obviously, few people that were aware of the situation in my team, and this is in the job. Then also outside of the job, people close to me they came in and they really helped me through that moment. I had friends that would sleep with me at night just to make sure I was safe. My brother flew from Italy. He was supposed to arrive 3 weeks later. I called him one day, I was really in a crisis. He took a plane, he left his kid that was 1 year old, the wife came, stayed with me 10 days. Then he went back, he picked up the family, he came back again for their vacation, anticipating vacation. Now, why I'm saying all of this? Because in the moment, I realized the power of kindness more than ever. The kindness that my parents were talking about when I was a child, I saw it in action. And I saw it in action in my life. So after that, I cut all the people who are not like this from my life. I was like, okay, just focus on this love and kindness. I found it at work as well. And I realized that I needed to really double down in this because I was lucky that I had, a CEO that thought in the way, but mostly also that I had a team that had that kind of culture. That team was not ready there to take my job or take it. It was like this. That was my team. And so I realized that that was very important for me. But then I realized also that that was very important for the company too. Imagine if every time somebody has a moment of weakness, you have a series of people that are there ready to stab this person in the back, try to get the job and everything. Imagine how inefficient something like this is, how bad it is for your company, how, something like this, the lack of trust and kindness and support of each other is driving lack of productivity, lack of efficiency. Now, why I'm using these words that are really business corporate word? Well, because while kindness is an ethical value, something we should have in society no matter what, the reality is that often we are driven by other kind of values: fame, wealth, money, business growth. But if you can link kindness and love to business growth, to productivity, to the synergy you need to build in a company to drive efficiency, then people start to listen. And so in the past many years, I started this journey. I really want to be an ambassador of this people in love with people, the subtitle of my book. I'm also linking it to some value creation inside these organizations. And this has been wonderful and is giving me a new purpose in life, if you want. And let's say, just to close, the moment of crisis was the catalyst, the unlock. But obviously, that moment, and I mentioned earlier, therapy helped me understand what was the root driver and the root cause of the way I was feeling. And I found again in the education that my parents gave me really something that saved me in the specific moment, and then that I want to really be the ambassador of right now.
That's wonderful. And I really want to thank you for sharing this story because, for a couple of reasons at least. Number one, I feel it's so incredibly valuable when people like you, and I say people like you because I've been following you and I've been watching you, and you strike me as someone who's one of the most joyous appearing people out there. And so I can totally see why you would self identify as an optimist. And it's so important to illustrate these stories because we look at people like you and sometimes we're thinking, right, this person is always happy and nothing like this would happen to them. It only happens to me. I think it's so important to share these stories so that people out there who are going through a situation like you did don't feel lonely, and also don't feel like this is something that you shouldn't share with anyone and you should be hiding. And also, what you have shared about your CEO, I think it's so striking and so wonderful for me because it's really, you've mentioned that you table, and from the vantage point where she was sitting, she couldn't see you. And yet she saw you. And I think she saw you literally and metaphorically. And for me, being able to see your team members in situations like that is the first necessary condition of cultivating a sense of belonging at work and the sense of community that we all need to be able to achieve the things that you've mentioned, right? Which is growth, efficiency, effectiveness, innovation, high performance, etc., etc. And there's actually plenty of evidence that the sense of belonging really drives engagement and high performance at work. It's such a beautiful illustration.
She saw me and she decided to act on it as well.
Yes,
That's an on. So the first step is to have that empathy and therefore their awareness to feel the people around you and really care about them. But sometimes you do, you feel, eventually you even care. But then, oh gosh, we're in the middle of strategic planning. In this break, I should talk about, those numbers that are really not the right ones for the business, or I should connect to that person that I don't see because she's based in China and it's our only opportunity to talk about the business strategy for China right now. And instead, she decided to act on what she saw. That's special, right? Really special.
that's
And
special.
yes, you're right. When you do it, you build a bond, a loyalty, a connection that is authentic, first of all, but is also very valuable for the organization. It needs to be authentic. If it's fake, it's not going to last.
I think that differentiation between empathy and what you've mentioned, empathy combined with action, I like to define it as compassion. Because indeed, you can, as you say, you can see people and you can even feel the sadness, but then you move on. And as you say, it's not enough, right? You really, if you really want to build these bonds, you need to take action. This is a beautiful, beautiful illustration on how someone in such a high position, as you say, with such high pressure situations and priorities can still step out of their way, get out of their way in order to support someone, your brother, your CEO, your friends. And we all know that we need these communities to thrive, right? The belief that a lot of us have in the Western world that we can carry on in spite of all the obstacles of life alone and figure it out alone is a complete illusion. And I think in situations like that, we quickly realize that it takes a village to live, really, and survive life. And I'm so glad that you had the village to support you during that time. And thanks again for sharing this story.
Being kind to others, spreading love in a selfless way is also an amazing driver of happiness once again. In the book I talk about 3 steps you go through to reach your happiness. Is a book about innovation, business, culture, design, but at the end of the day is a book about human beings. And it was, I thought, the ideal way to close the book to talk about how to use everything I've been talking about to really go after the biggest project that we have in our lives, that is our happiness. And so there are 3 steps again that come from human science, and the second one is really related to what we're discussing right now. The first one is investing yourself, your identity. It starts when we are child. We need to define who we are in connection to others surrounding us. Your job is very important, obviously, but think about the example I gave of my mother and my father. Their art, their writing was not their job, but it was still part of who they were in society, in the world. The second dimension is this selfless love, giving love to others without expecting anything in return, but this selfless love happening in a close community, family, your work environment, friends, usually you give and you receive back. And this is so beautiful. When you just are nice to people, kind, loving, and then it comes back. It doesn't need to come back from the person you are helping in the moment. It just come back as positive energy you're building, and it's really fulfilling. Then there is a third dimension that often comes later in life, that is the idea that at a certain point you need to do something bigger than you and the close community you have. Is what we call purpose in life, is transcending your personal interest, is something that is selfless, but really, towards the world and society. And again, it can happen also in your work. For instance, in my job, in my work, the idea of looking at PepsiCo, the company I work for, as a platform to reach billions of people, and therefore trying to add value through that platform to their life. It could be by adding convenience, fun, joy, more sustainable products, healthier products, more personalized on the basis of what you need, you and not others. And so there are many different values you can identify, but really looking at that as an amazing opportunity to really change the industry, change the world, or this idea of people in love with people, human centricity. I have a platform. Thank you, PepsiCo, for giving me this platform, and a platform that I built on my own in social media over many, many years. And now, okay, what do I do with this platform? I have a responsibility. I could just self promotion, and who cares, or not even promote that, invest in the platform. Instead, I'm thinking, okay, what message can I give that really help the world, society in some form or way? And so, again, it's part of your journey towards happiness. It sounds really selfless and beautiful to say in a podcast, but the reality is that even that is somehow selfish. Essentially, is a way that we find to defeat death, to build a legacy, to become immortal, to build memories that will last even when we're not gonna be here anymore.
So true. And you've mentioned PepsiCo. You are PepsiCo's first ever chief design officer. I'd like to ask you a few questions about that. So you joined PepsiCo, I think a little bit more than 10 years ago, with a mandate to infuse design thinking into its culture. And it's evident to me that you've had an incredible success doing so. And obviously, we run a show about company culture, so I cannot not ask you, tell me how you approached that task of creating an environment where innovation thrives, especially at the beginning of your journey, right? So you start from scratch. This role has never existed. And someone tells you, we want to be more innovative. How do you build a team and how do you build a culture where breakthrough innovation can happen? The kind of innovation that you have just mentioned that actually changes the world, that makes the world a better place for everyone.
Well, we could talk for hours about this topic, right? That is
Of
also
course.
very close to my heart, and obviously, I really love the question. Look, a few things. First, go in with a dream. You need a vision. You need a dream, and the dream needs to be a dream. Therefore, somebody will think that is naive, that is childish, that is, too ambitious, but it's fine. I mean, it needs to be realistic. You need to understand how to make it happen. But obviously, again, there is this ambition embedded in the very idea that this is a dream and is a vision for the future. And you need to live that dream. You really need to do it in an authentic way. With the dream in mind, you first of all start to attract, to hire in the organization people that share the same dream, people that want to be those change agents. They want to really drive transformation, that are excited by this. They know perfectly that to embrace that dream, it will be difficult. You will find all kind of roadblocks. It's going to be a challenge, and they are excited by that versus being demotivated by the challenges. And so, again, having a dream, storytelling the dream, sharing the dream, and attracting a bunch of people that are ready to go with you towards that dream. Now, obviously, all of this is not enough at all to drive culture change. You need a few things that are really important. When I joined PepsiCo, I came from 10 years at 3M doing exactly the same job, moving from a medium level position as design manager in Italy to become by the way, I was the first design manager in the company at the time to become the first chief design officer of the company. In those 10 years at 3M, looking back at my mistakes, my failures, what went well, my successes, I define a sort of playbook or roadmap to follow when you want to change culture in organization. So in my first interview with Indra Nui, with the CEO of PepsiCo back then, we didn't talk much about designing products and brands. We talked about designing culture and transforming culture. And I shared with her the 5 phases I went through in 3M to drive that change of culture. And it's exactly what I did in the past 11 years in PepsiCo after that. And it's probably the reason why Indra hired me back then, because she was, in that journey to change the culture of the company with performance, with purpose. So essentially, the first phase is what I call the denial. This is typical of any human being, and therefore of any organization. And why? Because we are all reluctant to change. Maslow told us, many years ago why. Because our basic instinct is safety. We want to protect ourselves, and we see change as a potential disruptor of the safety. So we are inclined to protect the status quo. If your company doesn't understand that it needs to change, you risk to die. Because the paradox of human nature is, even if we are designed by human nature to protect the safety of the status quo, nature keeps evolving with his, the universe has his inertia, and it keeps evolving. And if you don't adapt and change, you will disappear. But the universe will keep going. If we keep doing what we're doing to the environment, our human species will disappear. But the planet will go on. They don't need the human beings. We need to change, evolve, and adapt. And so sooner or later, in this company, somebody realized that they need to change. You can hear my kid in the background.
Beatrice. This must be
Beatrice.
Beatrice. I follow you on Instagram. So she's so cute, by the way, everyone. You really need to follow Mauro on Instagram, and the 3 Pomeranians as well. Oh my gosh. Cuteness overload.
So we were saying denial. At a certain point, somebody needs to realize that you need a change, unless you're going to face companies like Blockbuster or Kodak did. They stayed in denial for too long. Who is the person that realized that you need a change? The most of the time is the CEO or somebody at the top of the company. You may have many people in the organization that eventually understand that you need to change, but they don't have the authority, the resources to drive the change. You need somebody at the top. There is a good probability that somebody at the top will realize that the change is necessary, because this is what they're paid for. They are paid to understand where the world is going and how to drive the change. And actually, the middle of the company, the belly of the company, is the one usually that opposed to that change. The entry level eventually are the new, employees, the ones that want to change everything. The CEO eventually understand, the executive team, somebody understand. The center of the company is often a problem. But again, you have somebody at the top that decides that you need to drive the change. In the case of 3M, this person was the EVP, the executive vice president of the consumer business, Dr. Monosari. Then in 2002, he decided to take a super safe bet and hire a kid, I was 27 years old, in Europe to design in the consumer business, one of the 6 businesses of the company, just in the region Europe. So super safe bet. If I was going to fail, nobody would have realized, that even happened. So here I am. I come in and I take my suitcase. I go to Minnesota and I start to do all these meetings with executives in R&D, marketing, sales, pitching this idea of design, human centricity, changing the world, changing the company, changing the industry. And everybody loved it. There was excitement in the rooms. And I remember going to the Dr. Monosari, to my sponsor, and telling Mo, look, it's great. I mean, everybody's getting it. We're going to change the culture very quickly. It's going to be much easier than what we're thinking. And I remember Mo, that was always, a serious person, looking at me more serious than ever and telling me, everybody's lying to you. I'm like, what do you mean, Mo? I mean, you were not in the room. And I was thinking inside myself, you're wrong. You're wrong. I was in the room. You were not. And people were really sincerely, authentically excited. And then he goes on and he tells me, Mauro, I'm telling you that everybody is lying to you. And then he explains what he means with a metaphor or an analogy. Essentially, he tells me, imagine you are in an art gallery and you have a beautiful painting in front of you. Beautiful, you love it. And you have your pockets full of money. What do? You buy the painting. Well, Mauro, you and design and the culture you are trying to push, you are one of the pieces of art in the 3M gallery. But there are other pieces of art. The next HR project, the investment on a plant, a new investment on a new business model, a new brand. All these leaders, they're investing, they're putting their money in other pieces of art. They're not buying design. That was a major aha moment for me. That really changed my trajectory in 3M and then later on in PepsiCo. Because essentially, I realized that I was in what I called later on phase 2, the hidden rejection, the phase of hidden rejection. I had a lot of people that were not really believing what I was telling them. They were letting me think they were. Why? This happens all the time when you try to change culture. There are multiple reasons. Sometimes it's because They're uncomfortable giving you feedback. They don't want to disappoint this young guy full of excitement. Sometimes they just want to be kind to you. Sometimes they're really excited in the moment, but then the day after, the week after, they go back to their routine. Sometimes they are giving you signal that they're not really buying your idea, but you are blind to it because you love your idea. You love yourself. You love to think that you're loved is again human nature. So long story short, I realized that there was a major threat and I developed a technique to overcome that has been super useful for me over the years. Every time somebody tells me, I love your idea, I ask an investment on that idea. I ask money, people, some form of commitment so that
I love it.
essentially this person either is really involved and now we're going to drive it together, but the most of the time, this is forcing people to tell me the truth. The most of the time, they will tell you, well, I love it, but now I have other priorities, but we can work on this next or next year, next month. And so that's great because in this phase of hidden rejection, you need to find who is the people with you and you need to find mostly who are not, those people. And when somebody tells you, well, I'm not ready now, that's great because you unlock the opportunity to ask questions. Why is not the right moment? And maybe you can answer questions that they had they were not asking you. So this is very important because by answering those questions, by engaging in dialogue, you may eventually transform some of these people in a supporter of your project. The goal, though, in the phase of hidden rejection is to find those few that are with you. I call them the co-conspirators. Usually they are 1 out of 10. These come from statistic in another world, the world of consumers and products. We know that 2-3% of people are willing to buy new products before anybody else, and immediately after, and those are the innovators. Then we have the early adopters, the one that come immediately after but still before anybody else, around 9%. So 11-12% of people are the one buying something before anybody else. This happens with culture as well. Go look for your co-conspirators and know that 9 people out of 10 will not be with you. And it's fine. Don't get depressed, demotivated, demoralized if they're not with you. It's part of the game.
So liberating to know it because I think our expectations sometimes are not realistic, right? We want everyone to embrace our idea and we want everyone to engage with it actively. And then when they don't, we tend to be disappointed. So I think what you are offering here is a very valuable reality check. 1 out of 10 are going to be your co-conspirators.
I love that you are highlighting this point. Actually, when you have too many people embracing your idea, you need to ask yourself if there is something wrong. Sometimes, you just have a brilliant idea, everybody gets it. It's fine. Sometimes it can happen, but pressure test what you're doing. Pressure test either if your idea is disruptive enough or if people are really with you. And again, don't get demotivated by finding so many people are not with you. It's just part of the game. We know that's how innovation works or transformation of culture. Now, once you find those people, you move to the third phase. That is what I call the occasional leap of faith. Essentially, is when these co-conspirators take a leap of faith on you. It's occasional because it happened once out of 10 times. When I joined PepsiCo, I remember sitting down with HR to map the organization and the projects on two axes. On one, we put all the projects where I thought I could show value through design in a very quick way. So it needs to be quick and it needs to show value. So on one axis was that. In the other axis, we put the people assigned to those projects. And we started to identify the ones that we thought could be the co-conspirators and the ones that eventually were not because of their way of thinking, their courage, their ability to drive change. And so we doubled down on the projects where we had the right opportunity to deliver value quickly through design, some form of progress of value, and then the ones that had the co-conspirators. In this way, we started to build the first proof points. So this is what is your goal in the occasional leap of faith phase. to build proof points. One, two, few projects, the more, and then story tell the hell out of it. Talk about this in your social media, your personal one. In the case of PepsiCo, we build PepsiCo Design Instagram. We started to publish internal books of the projects we were doing. We started to work with the communication team to try to communicate in the internal newsletters. But again, I mentioned personal social media because personal social media has been very important for me to tell a story to my own company. Often companies divide internal communication, external communication. The reality is that a very
Mm.
powerful way to build internal culture is external communication because it's endorsed somehow by the world, is public, and also you see the feedback of people. The feedback of people in LinkedIn, in my social media, in Instagram, were enthusiasts for the projects that PepsiCo was doing, not just me, design, our team. Marketing, sales, R&D were part of those projects. They were all proud of being part of that. And so other people in marketing, sales, and R&D came knocking our doors and asking, can we be part of it? Can we do that on this brand, on this region? And every time I was like, yes, we can. Give me the money, invest. And few will drop off, a few will stay. And at that point, you start to build a critical mass of proof points. When you start to have enough proof points, a critical mass, the company we realized that you need to seriously invest in the new capability, in the new culture, and move from startup phase, the occasional leap of faith, to scale up phase. I call this fourth phase the quest for confidence. Why? Because moving from the pirates, the pioneers, prototyping cool stuff, is very different than moving to full on organization, processes, tools in a company with 300,000 people, and many, many brands, $80 billion revenue is extremely complex. And this is where often companies lose confidence because you're like, well, this thing worked when you are a pioneer and it was all driven by intuition and by your hearts and the pirates. But now at scale is not working. Wow. Why? Often it's not working because those processes and tools kill what made those projects and those initiatives successful. The intuition, the passion, the love, the control of all the variables. And so in the quest for confidence, to maintain the confidence of the company high, you need to have internal people. This is not something you do with agencies. This is internal culture. You can have the support of external partners, but it needs to be driven from within that know how to balance processes and tools on one side with passion, agility, intuition on the other. You need to have leaders that have that kind of ability to balance the two dimensions. And then you can also build these muscles inside the organization. My organization at the beginning, in the third phase, was really all passion. Then I brought in additional capabilities. People that can really working very, very well on processes and tools and frameworks and ways of working. And so you rebalance that both within yourself, in the leaders you choose, but also with the mix and the diversity of your team. Once you succeed in the fourth phase, you move to the fifth one. That is what I call holistic awareness. The new culture is part of your DNA. But even in that phase, you're already thinking about the next denial, the next leap of faith, the next hidden rejection. Why? Because it's very important that these companies keep working towards the ideal state that is unreachable. Plato told us thousands of years ago, the world of ideas. You need to understand where to go, and then you keep improving and growing and going in that direction. We are right now in PepsiCo in denial, in the rejection, leap of faith, all the different phases in different parts of the organization, in different projects that we're pushing. Some are totally holistic awareness. Some other initiatives are new, and we are eventually between denial, leap of faith, and we map all of this. I'm mapping both our capabilities in design as well as our regions around the world. We have 17 designers around the world on a map that is designed on the base of these 5 phases so that we are aware that the second phase is difficult for certain kind of reasons. The fourth one is difficult, but in a different way. And so we know how to move in each of them.
This is so incredibly useful. Oh my gosh, the 5 phases, we're going to put them in the show notes for our listeners as well so that you have something in writing. Thank you for sharing that. I think one of the things that it does having this process in mind is that it creates realistic expectations around what's possible, and also great focus on, okay, right now we're in the denial phase. So this is what we need to do. And this is what's realistic to expect from the process. Thank you for sharing this. I really, really appreciate it. Being mindful of time, I know that we are running to the end of our conversation. I wish we had more time. I want to ask you, Mauro, when you think about the shadow of the leader in this whole process, right? Because obviously, I think every leader has disproportionately big impact on company culture. One thing I think is the formal power that you have, for example, in your position, but it's also the reputation that you carry, et cetera, et cetera. How do you try to show up with your team in order to cultivate the culture and behaviors that you want to see in others? Are you intentional around that? And if yes, what are maybe some of the practices that you implement or ways that you go about it?
I became really, really intentional about every behavior over the years. It's been really a journey. At the beginning was pure instinct. I was moving in this unknown forest with a sort of machete, finding a way and building a new path and learning not just about the company, about the projects, but learning about myself. It's been a journey of self-awareness. And I'm sure, even though today I consider myself pretty self-aware, I'm sure that in 20 years, I will be like, oh my God, when I was, 20 years ago, I just didn't get it, right? So it's just a journey. And we need to be aware that you keep growing in this journey of self-awareness. But again, at a certain point, I reach an awareness about what were those behaviors that were really making the difference in my journey. And the way I did it, it's kind of interesting, looking back. It started 15, 16 years ago now. I was at 3M and I was building my team, my organization, and I needed to hire people that could be part of, that dream. And so I briefed the recruiters. We were using some of the best recruiters in the world for design, and they had all the technical skills that these people needed. And then I told them, some soft skill, as you do when you brief a recruiter. Of course, you also mention, the soft skills you look for. But again, intuitively, I was mentioning some soft skills. And here we are. I start to get a lot of resumes of people who were really good in design, really good in business, but eventually were not the right fit for what I was trying to do from a culture standpoint. I didn't realize often right away in the interview. Sometimes it was so obvious that, I realized then, but very often I realized when it was kind of late, when they were already in the company, in the organization. And I started to write down what was working, what was not, both in me, in the way I was behaving, and what I was observing in these people. The successful one, what were they doing to be successful? And what was stopping them from being even more successful? Long story short, I came up with a list of characteristics of these ideal innovators that I gave to HR and to the recruiters back then, so 16 years ago, to 3M. And they told them, look, you need to find people with this kind of characteristics on top of the technical skills and everything. So we started to hire these people. And again, we started to use the list. I started especially to use the list in different ways to understand who are the people to grow, to understand how to inspire them, to understand how to inspire myself, to understand, to transforming this list in a compass for me and the teams on the ideal innovator, the ideal profile, and the ideal culture, therefore, of the organization. And again, year after year, I started to validate many of these assumptions. Eventually, something drop off. Other things came in the list. And then I realized that I needed to make it more and more public. So it became a paper in the DMI, Design Management Institute review, the magazine of the Design Management Institute. It became the topic of many of my speeches in conferences. And then later on, it became part of our pillars in PepsiCo. It's published in our internet site. And then it became the core topic of a book, even a book. Why all of this? Because I wanted people out there to understand, even before coming to the company, what were the values that I was looking for. I want this kind of unicorns. And mostly now, to directly answer to your question, that list, published and public as it was, it became really a very, very important compass for me, as I told you earlier. But now I had the responsibility to really embody those behaviors, to really be the example 24/7 at work, but also at home, in front of the community that surround me, in my social media. I needed to embody those values. So to write down a list, no matter what are your values, write down the list and make it public will force you to be very self-aware and to be really conscious about the way you manifest those behaviors. So when you say that the ideal leader needs to be kind, optimistic, curious, respectful, in love with diversity, have the ability to dream, have the ability to make things happen, resilient. I'm just mentioning few of those 24 different characteristics. Well, every day you need to be kind, you need to be optimistic, you need to be resilient, you need to think, to really make sure that the people keep understanding you're thinking big, you're dreaming, but you're also practical. These people need to deliver projects every day. There is the quarter by quarter results, so you need to show also that. So it really, writing down things and sharing them really forces you to stick to them. If you believe in them, if you really believe in them, write them down, share them with your team, and stick to it all the time. Force yourself. Sometimes it's not easy.
Yeah, it's really interesting how you arrived at this list, because what I'm hearing is it was an iterative process, right? So you observed, you tested it out, you challenged yourself in your assumptions, you really validated this in reality. And I think this is probably, in my mind, what made it so successful. Because what I often see is senior executives going on an offsite and just, kind of scratching their heads and asking themselves, right, so what are the core values that will make us successful? And they come up with 5 things, and it's supposed to be the thing that will drive everything forward since then on. And of course, it's ridiculous, because you really need to base it on reality. You need to base it on what makes you successful, what kind of characteristics play well with your team and within your industry and what you're trying to do. So it's such a great illustration of an approach that actually works, because I think, a lot of companies have values, but I think very few find a way to truly live them, and live them in such a way that they are a fantastic enabler of their strategy. Because at the end of the day, this is what we need, right? You want to be successful. You want to be able to implement your strategy. And at the same time, I feel, and I always say, your values also need to be unique, right? They really need to be you. And the problem is, when you look at most of Fortune 500 companies' values, you'll find the same words, and they're phrased even in the same way, like teamwork, integrity, etc., etc. And it's boring and very often just so generic, like license to play. So thank you for sharing your approach and how you have landed on your list and how you use it.
One thing that is very, very important, very quickly, is when you arrive to the list, you can do it even during those offsite. You can do it personally, your interior journey and process. But no matter how you do it, once you arrive to the list, if you make it public, you really need to embody those behaviors. The worst thing you can do for your company is to publish a list. Often, companies have the value, and then you see executives, especially executives, that don't behave in that way. That's the worst thing you can do, because you disintegrate the trust of your organization in the executive team, in those values, and even the one that you actually believe in, that you are having, even those lose credibility because you're not embodying all of them in the proper way.
So true. That's really the worst, and I think the most toxic thing that can happen in an organization. Mauro, the challenge is I'm going to ask you 5 questions in rapid succession, and you'll try to answer all 5 in under 2 minutes. Okay? Shall we give it a go?
Let's try.
Let's go for it. Okay, let's try. So at CultureLab, the company that I run, we always say we're on a mission to make work synonymous with fun, meaning, and belonging. And I want to ask you, what is your number 1 tip to infuse work with more fun and playfulness that are so necessary for innovation?
You need to have people that enjoy to have fun. You need to embody those kind of behaviors in everything you do. And you need to really, manifest them even when, in those moments, eventually you're not in the mood of having fun. Try to embody those behaviors so that people will be inspired by that, will replicate that, and things will happen then.
What is the sign, or perhaps multiple signs, that a company's approach to innovation and its culture needs some work, or perhaps even a major overhaul?
Well, the ultimate sign is when the company is not able to produce an innovation, obviously. But
Yeah.
even before arriving there, is the inability of people to take risk, to change the game, to have the courage to do things differently. Is when you make a mistake and you're crucified or punished for those mistakes, then it's really time for the company to change something.
Are there any companies that you admire for the culture? And if yes, what are they?
Well, without talking about a specific company, I grew up with the model of the Italian small medium enterprises, where there were these visionary CEOs and entrepreneurs working with these visionary creative people. And then behind the scenes, these experts of technologies and manufacturing, they really build entire industries. And so the model of agility and visionary people driving change, talking together, having a good meal and taking decisions and driving it is very powerful. The challenge is how to scale that up. But yeah, that's what I admire, the agility and the vision and the ability to dream.
I am also all for good meals whilst you're at it. Okay, tell me about your favorite books that you believe our listeners are going to benefit from. And it doesn't have to be a business book, but really something that you believe people should read if they want to think deeper and better about cultivating an environment where human beings can thrive at work.
I love biographies because they're real. There is not an academic that tells you all the theories of how to do things that, by the way, are really important. But so I deeply love the biography of Steve Jobs by Walter Isaacson. I just bought, I didn't read yet, Walter Isaacson's latest book that is on Elon Musk, a very controversial figure. Of Walter, I read the biography of Leonardo da Vinci and of Einstein. Great. Shoes Dog of Phil Knight, the founder of Nike, is another great one. And so why? Because you really see the personal journey of these people and what they went through to achieve what they achieved. The two biographies of Richard Branson also, Finding My Virginity and Losing My Virginity. And again, it doesn't mean that they are perfect people. You will see also the dark side of these people. You will see the bright side, but that's beautiful as well because you see that they're human, they made their mistakes, eventually they have their dark sides, and you will decide what to be inspired from and what eventually to not take, because then you need to define your own identity. It's part of your journey to happiness as well.
So, final question in the series of five. Is there a question that I haven't asked you but should have?
What is the most important characteristic that you look for in a person when you hire that person? The answer is already in what we discussed today, but tell me if you want me to answer or we leave it for the next podcast.
Please answer, and maybe we can elaborate.
It's kindness. And I'm not saying this because it's nice to say in a podcast or to write in a book. In PepsiCo, that's when I was in PepsiCo, I arrived in PepsiCo, I shared this list of the characteristics of these people. It was not yet the final one that is in the book. It was a shorter one. And characteristic number 0, it was on purpose, not number 1, number 0 was kindness. Or back then I wrote being a good person. Because in Italian we have a word that is buono, essere una persona buona, that is difficult to translate in English. The closest way is being a good human being. And so that was 0. I told HR, talent acquisition, don't even introduce people to me if they don't have this characteristic. But obviously, it was a strong message to my own organization as well, being like, okay, if you don't behave in this way, there is no way for you to grow inside this company. I mean, in my team, and it was interesting because obviously here and there I hire people that were not like that. But if you are surrounded by love and kindness, sooner or later, either you start to change a little bit, even though changing human nature is difficult, or most of the time you just drop and you move out. Love is contagious, is really powerful. And, we live in a moment right now that is very, very difficult. We are witnessing so many things happening all around the world. And I think we really need to do everything we can to spread a message of love, respect, peace, and not just in the moment of crisis. Do it consistently, even in those moments. There are no moments of crisis, and then just double down in moments that need a message more than ever. But again, it's so powerful. Kindness, love, being good human beings is so powerful. It gives you so much satisfaction as well. It gives you happiness, but mostly helps contribute creating a better society where we are all together living in peace one with the other.
So, so true. And I think we need to record another episode now on kindness and love in business, because I know that you have a lot of interesting things to say about it. These might sound like very sort of frilly or woo woo ideas to some people, especially in the context of the workplace. But I know that you have a lot of really powerful stuff to say about how to approach it in the workplace and why it's a really sound strategy, right?
No, yeah, and look, at the beginning of this journey, when I didn't have yet credibility in the company, it was difficult for me to talk about love and kindness, even though I believed in it. So there have been foundational pillars of the culture that I built in my team, but I was not as vocal as I am today. Now I can be more vocal because there are business successes. That's when they listen to you, like, okay, to drive all of this, by the way, that one of the key driver was kindness, was love, and so it's very concrete. We're talking about a company with 80 plus billion dollars revenue, 20 brands above the $1 billion, and 40 on top of them between 250 million and a billion. This is a company where you need to drive results quarter by quarter. So, and I started by myself as designer here, and we have now almost 350 people, 17 design centers around the world, and growing. We've been saving hundreds of millions of dollars to the company over the years through our work, but mostly generating work that is worth billions of dollars in front of the consumers. All of this love, this kindness, this ability to trust each other, to work with each other, increase efficiency, increase the productivity of what we're doing, increase the ability to generate quality, because we live in a world where you need to work with others. You need to leverage different kind of expertises. You need to leverage the diversity of thinking of different professional communities and different human beings to drive the quality and the efficiency that all these companies look for. So kindness and love sounds like words that are really romantic. With my Italian accent, they sound even more romantic, probably. But the truth
Indeed.
is that they're really driver of growth, financial value, and obviously human value. I wish they would be something that every company, every community of the world embrace just because it's the right thing to do for our world and our society. Unfortunately, it's not exactly like this, but today, more than ever, you can link them back to financial value, and they can be a strategic driver for your growth and a competitive advantage for your organization.
So true. Mauro, you have so much interesting work out there. Couple of things I want to mention is obviously your first book, and I think that our listeners are already familiar with it. I know that you have a new book now that has come out about your work in the past 10 years in PepsiCo. Has it already been released? Are we awaiting the release date? I think it's end of October, right? When it's going to be out in the world.
It's very different than the book, The Human Side of Innovation. That is a book written completely, that you read. This new book, there is a lot of projects, a lot of pictures. It's big, it's a coffee table book. And then there are essays written by me, written by our CEO, Ramon Laguarta, and a variety of other topics and themes about design, innovation, and branding and culture inside our organization.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I can't wait to get it on my coffee table. Thank you for putting it together. Thank you and your team for putting it together. I think a lot of people are curious, what has come out from your team and PepsiCo in terms of design. I also know that you have a podcast. So we're going to put a link in the show notes to your show as well, where you talk to interesting people. Thank you for doing that piece of work as well. What are other places where people should go online if they want to learn more about you, about your work, about PepsiCo? Like, what are the best online places that we should put links to?
Well, for PepsiCo, we have our Instagram account, PepsiCo Design. And there we publish a lot of work coming from all around the world. Personally, I'm very active both in Instagram, Mauro Porcini, and LinkedIn, Mauro Porcini. And so those are the three areas where you will find the most about us, with updated content. We also have a internet site, pepsico.com/design. So information there as well, in case you are interested to deep dive a little bit more on our reality of PepsiCo Design.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being in conversation with me today, Mauro. We've learned so much from you, so many actionable insights. I think every time I interview a leader like you in an organization where they actually need to do the work with their teams, I realize how important it is to have theories around culture, but also really to be practicing it like you for so many years. And there's obviously so much wisdom coming from this experience. And what I also find is how wonderfully you metabolize that wisdom and structure it so that other people can use it. Like, for example, the 5 stages of culture change. So thank you both for doing the work, but also for metabolizing it in a way that is super useful to everyone. And I hope to be able to get you again on the show, and maybe we can unpack the business case, and not only for kindness and love in the workplace.
It would be a pleasure. Thanks for having me today.
I'm Aga Bajer, the creator and host of the CultureLab podcast. And this is the CultureLab team.
Anis El Nabarawi, production manager.
Sound producer, Heather McPherson, Twisted Spur Media.
Thank you for spending your time with Mauro and me on this episode of the CultureLab podcast. If you found this chat insightful, inspiring, or useful, and I'm guessing you did since you're still here, do me a solid. Take a few seconds to share this episode and maybe have a chat with someone about what you learned. Because when podcasts like this spark conversations, and those conversations turn into actions, that's when we start making real change in the workplace together. And if you're looking to dig deeper into these topics and connect with others who are shaping the culture within their organizations, consider joining CultureBrain, especially now because we're offering our listeners a 25% discount on the annual fees. To take advantage of this opportunity, mention this code when applying, CB25. To find out more and apply, head over to tinyurl.com/culturebrain. The link is in the show notes. Thanks again for tuning in. If you want to get free resources on cultivating a remarkable, powerful, and authentic company culture, especially in a business that scales, type this into your browser: agabayer.com/resources. If you haven't subscribed to the CultureLab yet, please do it now. That's the best way you can support our work. And finally, we would be ever so grateful if you could rate and review our podcast on the platform that you listen to. Thank you, and you are amazing for listening to this point. Not many people do.